couple on a quaint Vermont ski trip stumble upon a scene so eerie, they have to pause to snap some photos. An old car just backed right up and directly into an abandoned building on a quiet stretch of farmland. They had no idea those photos would become a vital piece of evidence in one of the state's biggest mysteries. Join us tonight for an incredible update thanks to advancements in science and generosity in the true crime community. This is the case of Brianna Maitland. Listener discretion is advised. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Lost Souls of America podcast. I'm your host, Jamie, and joining me tonight is our beautiful producer, Amelia. Hi, Amelia.
Hey, Jamie. How are ya?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. Today was the first day I went outside my house and all the daffodils were up. It was like such a relief that winter is finally coming to an end.
Oh, I'm so grateful. I love daffodils too. They're like, I don't know, just that brightness of spring and sunshine. I actually have a daffodil tattoo on the back of my ankle.
They're so happy.
I agree. Unlike winter, which to me is gloomy.
Yeah, yuck.
I know that we have been talking about some TV that we've been watching recently. Bad Vegan. Did you finish Bad Vegan?
I did finish Bad Vegan. Did you?
I thought it was really
Vegan?
compelling. I finished Bad Vegan, and I was texting you like all through episode 4. I'm like, I don't feel so bad for her anymore. Okay, just kidding. I feel really bad for her now. Okay, maybe I don't feel as bad. Okay, I'm somewhere in the middle. I was like giving you the play-by-play.
It's so weird. The whole story is very bizarre.
It is. And I don't want to like spoil too much, but you guys should listen to it. It was really good. Or watch it. Listen to it. What is this? It's on Netflix.
What do we do? It's on Netflix. It's 4 episodes. Our listeners might not know this. I've been vegan for 18 years. I do some like vegan influencing online. So let me tell you, everyone sent me when Bad Vegan came out. They were like, oh, look at this.
I immediately thought of you. Like, well, okay. So she's Bad Vegan. She's a restaurant owner, which so are you.
Yeah.
She is from your neck of the woods in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
And she's kind of like a little woo-woo into like astrology.
She's very woo-woo.
She takes it a little farther than you, even, I would say.
She took it pretty far there, yeah.
Yeah. But and she loves animals. So I was like, as I was watching this, I was like, oh man, Amelia's gonna love this. Oh man.
I did. I really loved it. You know, it's compelling and makes you think.
Yeah. I don't know who would invest in her again, but it'd be nice to see that restaurant come back. It sounded good. I want to eat there.
I mean, hey, if anything happens with Alec Baldwin and his wife, I'm sure she'll find some investment money somewhere.
Had you heard of her before?
I had not, no.
See, that's what I wondered. I wondered if she was like a big name in the vegan community or not.
I'm sure in New York City, she's like the biggest, but if it's not in Massachusetts, I don't really keep up with it that much. As bad as that is.
Go follow Amelia on Vegan Massachusetts. Okay, so what's kind of funny about tonight's case is that way back before we were even a podcast, I knew somehow I wanted to do something where I was like telling these people stories. And so I actually had a physical list of names and cases that I wanted to kind of share somehow before I had really figured out what that would mean or what that would look like. And I'm not joking you, Amelia. Brianna Maitland / Maura Murray is my number 1. It's the first thing on the list.
Oh,
I know. Clearly, I've skipped over it for 19 episodes now in favor of something else. I think a lot of the time, I was like, oh, this story's popular. It doesn't need my help. What am I going to do? There's a lot of attention already on the story. So I think I was like focusing on maybe some lesser known cases and I don't know. I don't really know why I haven't covered it. But 3 days ago, 3 days ago, I found out that there is an incredible update to the Brianna Maitland investigation. And for me, it was like the record stopped. We were like, stop what we're doing. We have to talk about Brianna. This is the week. So here we are. I know. And you had kind of a weird coincidence with this case this week too.
I did. Yeah. The last place she was seen alive, we're actually covering on Ghost Hunting in New England tonight.
That's crazy. That's a small little
Blacklight Tavern and Inn in Vermont, which is very haunted.
Can you give me like a little, I don't want to spoil your episode, but can you give me a little like sneak peek or no?
There is a very spooky something going on in the shower. Tune in to last week on Ghost Hunting in New England to find out more.
I will listen. But here's my question. Here's what I really want to know. Did this exist pre-Brianna's disappearance or post-Brianna's disappearance? Like, could she be the ghost?
No.
Pre. Okay.
This has been going on for a while.
And when we talk about the haunted Black Lantern Inn on Ghost Hunting in New England.
Black Lantern. Did I call it the Black Light Inn? It's so gross.
I don't know. I don't think so.
Imagine going to stay at the Black Light Inn.
I don't want to know.
Sorry.
When you talk about this inn on Ghost Hunting in New England, does Brianna come up like other than what we're talking about now? Or no. Okay, no. Cool. I just was curious. That's very interesting.
It's going to come up because we're talking about this, but no, when you Google haunted hotels of Vermont, she does not come up.
Okay.
Which is probably a good thing.
That probably is a good thing because this is an active open case and you all need to get those Google alerts set for Brianna Maitland. Are you ready to hear all about it?
Yeah, I think we should just dive right in.
Brianna Alexandra Maitland was born on October 8th, 1986 in Burlington, Vermont to loving parents Kelly and Bruce. She was raised with an older brother in the small town of East Franklin near the Canadian border where her parents owned and operated a farm. She grew up doing farm chores and hated it, and she excelled at martial arts, especially jiu-jitsu. On her 17th birthday, her parents hesitantly agreed to let her move out about 15 miles away and to transfer to the Enosburg Falls High School. Brianna hated the country life. She had no desire to be a farmer like her family, and she wanted to go where her friends were, where her boyfriend at the time was, and to a town where she felt like there were more opportunities for her future. It would seem, though, that things weren't as easy on her own as maybe she had expected they would be. For nearly 6 months, Brianna seemed to bounce from friend's house to friend's house until ultimately in February of 2004, she actually dropped out of her new high school and moved in with her childhood friend, Jillian Stout. Now, I want to be honest, as a mom, that kind of sent my spidey senses tingling, like a little bit of a red flag, right? Like, I think it's easy to judge that situation and say, oh my gosh, if my child moved out and then, was immediately bouncing from house to house and dropped out of high school, I would be like, something's going on here. Come home, right? This is a problem. This doesn't seem to be going according to the plan. What do you think?
Yeah, for sure.
And we're not the only ones who wondered that. And so her parents actually speak pretty openly about that in interviews now. Brianna's parents insist that this period of restlessness was just their daughter trying to assert her independence and learn who she is and what she wanted. Initially, she stayed with her boyfriend's parents, but they broke up. And so she didn't want to come home and she was trying to make it work on her own with friends. They're adamant that there were no problems at home or dramatic issues going on in her life causing instability.
Hold on. I'm sorry. Can I stop you for a second?
Yeah.
She dropped out of high school, right?
Yeah.
And her parents are like, she's just figuring out her own way.
Yeah. We'll get to that in a second. I know. And I think a lot of people felt similarly. A lot of people are kind of like, that is not a parenting choice that I would make in this situation. Brianna wasn't entirely restless, though, and her friends and family describe her as actually still having big goals. As soon as she dropped out of high school, she very quickly enrolled in a program that would help her get her GED so that she could still head to college as soon as possible. And at the rate she was pushing herself, she was actually on track to be there before her friends even graduated. Now, maybe there wasn't drama at home, but Brianna was definitely struggling with her friend circles in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. 3 weeks before she was last seen, there was what I would certainly call a dramatic altercation with her friend Keely LaCrosse at a party. Though most sources list those circumstances as quote, unclear. In interviews, her friends say that Keely's boyfriend was paying a little bit too much attention to Brianna at a party. And it seems as if maybe Brianna was like not the kind of person to turn down that attention. You know what I mean? I don't want to say she was necessarily flirting with him, but that she wasn't really dissuading him either. The sources I used say that Brianna left the party and was sitting in her car trying to get some air and kind of cool off after Keely had confronted her and begun arguing with her at the party. And Keely came out of the house and began punching Brianna in the face through the open car window. Brianna was actually badly injured in this fight, and she was taken to the hospital afterward. She had a broken nose, scratches on her, and a concussion. Her friends say that she did not fight back at all. Even with all her jujitsu training, she just sat there and took the abuse because she didn't want to hurt Keely and to damage the friendship irreparably. The next day, though, a mutual friend persuaded Brianna to file a report with the police. She was like, listen, we were at the hospital all night. You're seriously injured. That was crazy. The fight was serious. You need to look out for yourself, right? Wouldn't you say that? I feel like I would say that if it was my friend.
Yeah. No, yeah, I agree.
Those charges were eventually dropped when Brianna went missing and she failed to return. Detective Sergeant Angela Baker from the Vermont State Police says that in those weeks between the fight and her disappearance, Brianna was somewhat ostracized from her friend group after pressing charges against Keely. Some internet rumors actually allege that this was stronger than just being ostracized, that she was being kind of bullied by this group of friends. The day of March 19th, 2004 started out as actually a really wonderful day. Brianna completed her GED exam in the morning, and her mom, Kelly, took her out to lunch and to do some shopping to celebrate. Over lunch, they discussed Brianna's college plans, and the two chatted excitedly about her future. After lunch, they shopped together some, and at one point, Brianna spotted something like through the shop window that caught her attention, and she told her mom, hey, I'll be right back, and she bounced off. Kelly completed her purchase, and she met Brianna at the car a few minutes later, but she said that her mood had like palpably shifted, that she seemed shaken. And she tried to ask a little bit about what was going on, but Brianna was pretty short with her, saying that she just needed to get home and get ready for her shift that evening. Kelly thought, oh, I don't want to pry, and she let it go. Though when she reported that, she reflected back on that decision with tears in her eyes. Kelly dropped Brianna off at Jillian Stout's house sometime between 3:30 and 4:30 that afternoon. It was the last time her mother ever saw her. Brianna got ready for work and left a note for her roommate saying she'd be home after her shift. She headed to work at the Black Lantern Inn in Montgomery, Vermont in her green 1985 Oldsmobile. When her shift ended, her coworkers invited her to hang out, and she said she had to work at her other job in the morning and she was just going to go home and get some rest. She left the Black Lantern. Everybody says it seemed like she was alone, sometime between around 11:20 and midnight. The next morning, March 20th, 2004, a Vermont state trooper was dispatched to an old abandoned house off of Route 118 outside of Montgomery, only about a mile from the Black Lantern Inn. The state police had gotten reports of a car crashed into the side of a house in a very peculiar way. It was reversed, trunk end first, with its hind wheels up on the foundation in such a way that it was definitely unable to drive back out. The car had a piece of plywood from a window covering on the house laid down over the trunk. Outside of the car, the trooper found loose change, a water bottle, and an unsmoked cigarette. Inside of the car, the trooper found 2 uncashed paychecks. He assumed that the car had been abandoned by a drunk driver who'd crashed and had towed it to a local garage.
It was her car, right?
It was her car.
Okay.
It was her car. When Brianna's roommate Jillian returned home from a weekend away and found a note from Friday night saying Brianna would be home when she clearly hadn't been home, she was a little confused and concerned. She calmed herself down and convinced herself as best as she could that everything was fine. Brianna had just, gone elsewhere for the weekend. But overnight, that nagging feeling of worry weighed on her. So sleepless and scared, she called Kelly on Tuesday, March 23rd, to tell her that she could not reach Brianna. Frantic with worry about this abnormal behavior, Kelly called absolutely everyone she could think of who might know where Brianna could be. When no one had seen or heard from her since Friday, she called the police and filed a missing persons report.
Is she in the trunk?
It took 2 more days for the officers to connect the abandoned car to the missing girl.
Was she in the trunk of the car?
No.
Oh.
But I'm laughing because I just on my end had like a glitch, like an internet glitch. And on my end, you went, was she in the trunk? 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 You said it like 30 times. It was really funny. Sorry.
Oopsies.
Back on track, everyone.
Was there any significance to the plywood being on the trunk?
No, but I will tell you that I don't have this in my notes. Well, at least not that they know of. I don't have this in my notes, but I will say that on the Murder Squad podcast, they interviewed Angela Baker, the detective sergeant that's on the case now. And she said that it's impossible to tell because the way the car kind of hit the house, you can't tell. The house is in such disrepair. It's like an old abandoned kind of already falling down house that you can't tell if the impact of hitting the building is what knocked it off the window onto her car or if somebody like removed it and placed it there. She said there was no way to tell. That's a good question. After news of Brianna's disappearance broke publicly, several people came forward to say that they saw the car at the old Dutchburn house as well. The first was reported as 11:30 p.m. to 12 a.m., that window, by a man who saw the car with headlights on, and he says he didn't see anyone in or around the car. The next report was between 12 a.m. and 12:30 a.m., and these people thought they saw the turn signal flashing, but they didn't see anyone in or around the car either. At 4 a.m., Brianna's former boyfriend actually drove by after a night of partying and thought that he recognized it and found it odd, but he saw no people on or around the car either.
That's suspicious.
He saw no people in the car. That makes no sense that there were no people on the car. There were no people in the car or on the car or near the car. You know what I meant.
Yeah, that's weird.
The next morning, March 20th, two tourists on a ski vacation happened by, and they found it so odd that they pulled out their disposable cameras and took photos. Since Brianna's car had already been impounded, this was an incredibly valuable piece of evidence. The photo corroborates the responding officer's report of the condition of the car and the items surrounding the car. But the tourists also reported seeing a broken bracelet or necklace on the ground next to the car. I'm going to throw in a little interjection here. In the interview I listened to with Detective Angela, she said how important things like this are becoming in solving cases in general, right? Like, that was just a disposable camera that these people probably only had because they were on vacation. But we all have cameras in our pockets all the time right now. If you see something weird and your spidey senses are tingling, you've got red flags, your intuition tells you like, this is not normal. This is a really weird scene. Take some pictures. What's it going to hurt? Just take a couple pictures and hang on to it. If you're really concerned, obviously call 911. And that's what these tourists did. They called and they reported it. And that's one of the things that got the police out there.
I agree. It won't take up too much storage in your phone. I have 64,000 photos on my phone, so you can take an extra too.
I have nothing to say to that. I'm a chronic deleter. Oh my gosh. I'm speechless. So at first, police were skeptical of foul play. They really thought that she must have just run away given her living situation. But still, the area was combed on foot by police and by dogs to no avail. If she had run away, there was no indication that she'd done so on foot. On March 30th, the car was collected from impound and processed as a potential crime scene. Investigators took their reports and then they just returned the car to the family. Brianna's dad, Bruce, noted other items of significance that Brianna had left behind as well. Her contacts and a contact lens case, her glasses, her prescription migraine meds, and her ATM card were all left behind. Plus, if you remember I said before, those 2 uncashed paychecks. Based on whatever the investigators recovered from the car, as well as Bruce's, insistence that these were like not items she would have gone without, the Vermont State Police acknowledged now finally publicly that this was a probable case of foul play. The investigation has pressed on slowly but steadily over the last 18 years, and I would love to tell you about some of the theories as well as the developments in the case. Before I do that, do you have any first impressions to share with us, Amelia? What do you think?
I think it was that young lady who got really upset.
The one that punched her?
Or like that whole group of friends. Who knows? I was in college one time, my freshman year, and I was hanging out with this guy, wasn't flirting with him. Nothing was going on. He had a girlfriend. I knew it. It was fine. We were like smoking pot or something. And his girlfriend called me up with a group of people and said they were going to come into my dorm and slit my throat.
Oh my God, that's scary.
That's like right around the same age group.
Yeah, people are crazy. Ooh.
It was really unsettling. Yeah.
So that is definitely one of the theories. You are correct. That is definitely one of the theories that is still prevalent to this day, especially like on the internet. A lot of people talk about that theory. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about all of them. So whenever anyone disappears, there are multiple options as to what could have happened, of course. In Brianna's case, pretty much everyone agrees right off the bat that there's just no reason for anyone to think that she took her own life and staged her car this way. It just doesn't make any sense. So we can pretty much rule that one out right off the bat. Though police initially suspected that she may have run away, the things she left behind and like the lack of preparation for such a big adventure just made them think otherwise. Furthermore, she'd had to have had some major help with that, right? And like, there's just absolutely no one that they've interviewed that seems to have any knowledge of that plan.
You don't run away as a teenager and not take all your paychecks with you.
Right. You would need every penny.
You need money.
And you would take your ATM card or you would
Right.
clean out your accounts or something. You would do something. One friend did actually say that she spoke about a road trip, but that it seemed more of like a fun and temporary vacation, not really starting over or anything. We also don't know what evidence was recovered that led the police to this conclusion that it was probably foul play. So we have to keep in mind that perhaps they have more in evidence that they recovered either in the car or at the scene that they're not telling us about, right? And that's always a good thing. But if foul play was involved, then who and why? And like you said, thoughts, one potential suspect that jumped out to me right away was, of course, the girl she'd had the altercation with, Keely LaCrosse. Well, Detective Angela shared that she's been thoroughly investigated and cleared as a suspect, both during the original investigation and then again when she took another good hard look at the case in recent years. Vermont State Police say that she's been nothing but cooperative. And when Jensen and Holes interviewed Detective Angela on the murder squad, they did bring up the theory that a lot of people on the internet like to point out, right? Maybe Keely didn't do it herself, just like you said. What about a group of girls? A group of her friends?
Exactly.
We've all watched enough of that show, Deadly Women, to know that sometimes that whole pack mentality can make a group of young women do really horrible things in the name of revenge.
You know, it could also even have like been the boyfriend who's like tired of the girlfriend getting upset with him and is like, well, I'll just get rid of her and then it won't be a problem.
Oh, I hadn't even thought of that. Yeah. Anyone involved in that social circle. Detective Angela says that her stance is still the same. Like there's just no evidence of it. But I don't know. I think, is it possible that Brianna was jumped by a group of angry friends or, acquaintances to Keely? Her family feels that because of her martial arts training, that multiple assailants or at least a weapon would have been the only way that anybody would have been able to like take Brianna without a fight. So that adds a little bit of credence to the group theory because she was so well trained in martial arts.
Yeah. And maybe it didn't start out like we're going to go murder her. Maybe it started out just as like jumping someone and it went real out of hand real fast.
Yeah. And that's in most of the cases you hear where that ends up being the verdict afterwards. That's usually how it starts. It escalates and the ringleader just like never stopped. And so all the other girls went along with it out of A, fear, and B, like that pack excitement.
Yeah.
Brianna's ex-boyfriend who spotted her car is not brought up frequently in any of these sources. So I can only assume that he's, I guess, been ruled out as a suspect, or maybe even the investigators have information that they're withholding. But rumors definitely swirl on the internet about how strange it would be for him to just happen to drive by her potential murder scene. But I mean, I guess until I can find any sources that corroborate, I don't know. There's no evidence.
My uncle got into a car accident and my aunt drove by it and didn't realize it was him.
Wow.
Just like drove by. And then he came home later and she was like, oh yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, that's kind of what he said. Too.
Really weird. Yeah.
Whenever anyone talks about him, period, the only two things they say is that initially she lived with him and that's like where she moved in when they moved out, when she moved out of her parents' house because she moved in with her boyfriend's parents. But then they broke up. And then the second part of the story is that he happened to drive by and see her car. But it was a Friday night, and if he was out partying with his friends, and we're talking rural Vermont. There's not a lot of like main road. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's no surprise if he happened to drive by it. And he did say that he looked at it and was like, is that Brianna's car? That's weird. And then just kept going.
Yeah, that's weird.
He might not have even processed, oh my God, that was definitely Brianna's car until later. It might have just been like, I thought I recognized it, but I don't know. I wasn't sure. I didn't want to get involved.
Right. Because do we have like a description of the car?
Yeah. It's a 1985 pale green Oldsmobile, but you have to keep in mind this was 2004. So that was not something unusual for a high schooler to have at the time.
No, that makes sense. My mom had one of those in 2004.
Oh, really? That's funny. One of the anonymous tips that came in the early weeks after her disappearance was that Brianna was being held in a house in Berkshire, Vermont, about 10 miles away from Montgomery. This house was being rented at the time by Ramon Ryans and Nathaniel Jackson, two known drug dealers from New York. Police raided the home on April 15th and found drug paraphernalia, as well as a significant amount of cocaine and marijuana, so they were arrested. At this time, investigators went pretty hard down the drug theory, trying to see if Brianna had any connection with the dealers. And it seems like they still hold some weight to that theory all these years later. Because it turns out she did actually know Ramon Ryans as an acquaintance. Brianna's friends and even her parents admit that she had experimented with drugs occasionally, but they all report feeling like it was just, typical teenage thing and that she only used it socially and for parties. They said that she'd done cocaine a few times, maybe tried crack a couple of times, but that if she was going to do anything, it was probably to just smoke a little pot. Now, listen, smoking a little pot in Vermont in 2022 is about as casual and convenient as buying a latte, right? But in 2004, your only way to get it was from someone who was providing it illegally, which meant that even pot dealers could sometimes be pretty unsavory characters. And there were some rumors swirling that the Dutch burn house was used as a meeting place for exchanges or parties. But Detective Angela says that there's no evidence to corroborate Brianna had any intention to have a meeting with anyone or have any reason to be at the Dutch burn house. Later in 2004, an affidavit was made that also said that Ryans and Jackson were responsible for her death. With graphic detail, the caller said that Brianna had been taken and held for a week, then was murdered and her body had been stowed in someone's basement for a while before she was dismembered with a table saw and disposed of on a pig farm. This caller alleged that the motive was money, that Ryans had borrowed some money from Brianna for a cocaine purchase, and he didn't like her asking for it back. Police say it's been investigated with no evidence to back up the claims, and that the person making the claim had very questionable credibility.
That's horrific.
I know. I think one of the things that Detective Sergeant Angela Baker was saying in the interview that I listened to was that it's actually kind of the pig farm thing is what's really made that rumor that they believe has no credibility stick around after all these years because it's so sensational. That's the part of this story that people want to remember. And it's unfortunate because it's, if that really happened, that would leave a lot of evidence. Like the way this woman described it, none of those things, maybe not the pig farm part, but the rest of it, right? Like dismembering her and storing her in a freezer and yada, yada. And they say there's no evidence of any of that. And Detective Sergeant Angela Baker feels a little, I don't want to assume her feelings, but she made a comment about how, people are hanging on to that rumor because of the sensationalism of that pig farm thing. Right. It's crazy. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy. Yeah. And that's like what horror movies are made of. You know what I mean? I think that's the kind of thing that like everyone's nightmares are made of. And I did go down the rabbit hole with the credibility of this rumor. Like I could tell you the whole story. I'm not going to because it's irrelevant, I think. But it does sound to me like it's not credible either. Like she had a reason to say this. She was getting something out of it in return. She's connected to another case, which I'll explain in a second. So it just, I don't know. I really don't see the basis for that one. The men were released awaiting trial on the drug charges when Ryan's girlfriend went missing. He was cleared of any involvement in that disappearance, and someone else has since confessed to her murder. That person who confessed has connections with the person who made the claim that Ryan's also killed Brianna with the pig farm. Does that make sense?
So they think that person did it?
The person that made the discredited or uncreditable claim that Brianna was disposed of on a pig farm
Mm-hmm.
is related to the person who actually murdered Ramon Ryan's girlfriend.
That's what I mean. Like, do they think
They
that
think
maybe
they think one of the reasons that she was throwing Ramon Ryan's name out there for Brianna Maitland was to get attention on him on the other cases, but also she had a son who was being arrested literally at the time she made this confession. She kind of like yelled it out as a way to get some favor for her son. Like, I have information to tell you.
Okay, I got it. I think I got it.
Yeah. I mean, it was kind of convoluted, the stuff that I listened to, and it also, I don't think, since they kind of discredited her, I don't think it's really super relevant to this case. So I didn't put the full story in here or anything, but that's the basics of it. So even though Ryan's has been cleared of any connection to the murder of his girlfriend, it's just not a coincidence that people were quick to forget. Ryan's actually cut a deal with the prosecution that he would tell them what he knew about Brianna in exchange for a lighter sentence. Though the investigators will not reveal what information he gave them, they do say it didn't lead to any results in the case. Detective Angela did suggest that Ryan's had suffered from some assumptions and biases by the public based on his appearance or drug connections, but that she certainly finds him suspicious and that his involvement is plausible, but that she has not been able to find anything that corroborates Ryan's involvement with Maitland. Brianna's disappearance has been investigated in connection with other murders as well. Just 5 weeks before Brianna went missing, UMass student Maura Murray went missing under similar circumstances, with police finding her car abandoned just 90 miles away from where Brianna's car was found. In later years, Brianna was investigated also after the suicide of serial killer Israel Keys, who had victims in Vermont. All connections to both cases have been officially ruled out by the FBI. Those are both cases that we have had requests to cover. So if you want to hear more about Maura Murray or any of the potentially unnamed victims of Israel Keys, then let us know. Let us know on our social media, I guess, and we'll talk about it, right? And now back to our feature presentation. In 2006, casino footage from Atlantic City revealed video of a guest who looked remarkably similar to Brianna. Investigators have never identified the woman, but Brianna's mom doesn't believe it was her. Human trafficking, though, is a very real possibility, and many have looked to that over the years as a potential motive. Brianna was very beautiful, and her family believes that that's a very real possibility for what happened to their daughter. Detective Angela Baker says it's a problematic area to investigate because there's so much shame and guilt surrounding sex work and addiction that many victims just don't or won't come forward. She does say that Vermont to New York was a route for drug trafficking at the time, and it is a theory that's always been at the forefront of their minds. In 2007, a flyer provided by the FBI to reinvigorate the investigation said that the car crash scene may have been staged to appear as an accident, officially validating something that many people already believed. The eerie manner in which the car was backed into the abandoned building left many people who saw it completely shaken. A lot of the armchair detectives of the world agree. Is it possible that she was trying to get away from someone and in her panic used reverse instead of drive, crashed the car, and then had to run out on foot? In 2016, the old abandoned Dutch burn house burned down. Some suggest it was an arson fire, that the building had been intentionally destroyed, though I couldn't find anything to verify that. I'm sure regardless of how or why, that was a devastating blow for the family. The evidence was long gone, but I imagine you always, hold out hope for some kind of advancements and opportunities. Also in 2016, investigators revealed that 1 week after her disappearance, they had collected an item from the ground near where Brianna's car had been found. This item could not be connected with certainty to Brianna, but this new announcement revealed that DNA had been collected from that item and had led to no matches. On March 18th, 2022, almost 18 years to the day of her disappearance, David Middleman at Othram announced that they had partnered with the Vermont State Police a while back, funded by none other than Paul Holes of the Murder Squad. Amelia, will you read that quote for us?
Autumn scientists used forensic-grade genome sequencing to build a DNA profile and conducted genealogical research to develop investigative leads so the Vermont State Police could continue their work. After months of follow-up investigation, police were able to locate, interview, and obtain DNA samples from candidate donors. These DNA samples were sent to the Vermont Forensics Laboratory for comparison testing. The lab confirmed that DNA from one of the individuals matched the DNA on the item found on the ground near Brianna's vehicle.
I have chills. That literally gave me chills when you read that out loud, even though I've read it before. It's very exciting. Ba-da-da. So it's really important to note that this does not mean that a suspect has been identified, okay? Remember, the DNA was collected on an item at the scene where Brianna's car was found, but there's no way to know, or at least there was, when that item was placed there or what the connection was. But it does match one of the people of interest they compared it to. Finally, after 18 years, it's currently being thoroughly investigated. So if the Vermont State Police determine that the person who the DNA belongs to has no reasonable explanation for being at the old Dutch burn barn sometime near Brianna Maitland's disappearance 18 years ago, then that person is going to have a serious problem. Why were you there? I guess, Amelia, I know this is usually your stance, but I guess just to play devil's advocate,
you could say that the girl, when she was punching it, something fell into the car and then it was bounced from the car when the car crashed?
Yeah, I think it might be. I think it's a different car, though. I don't think it was her car that she was sitting in when she was punched at the party. But that's a good point. Then. My example was like, say for example, it's her ex's sweater and it fell out of the car while she was like making a run for it. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean that he had anything to do with it. It's her car. What if something like fell out of the car? But you know, what if it's like so-and-so's blood? Then that's something pretty major. And I would also want to know what the item was. We don't know what the item was. Like if the item was a sweater versus if the item was like
a cigarette
connected. Butt. Yeah. Or yeah, because they were on smoked cigarettes too, but also and connected to like if something that could be connected to an actual murder or a crime. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if it was drugs or if it was some sort of weapon or if it was something. They haven't told us what it is. So here's what else I know. If someone caused harm to Brianna, which my personal opinion, I do believe that, I want them to hear this news. I want this to get back to them. I want them shaking in their boots. I want them living in fear that their days of freedom are numbered and that cold justice is about to be served. Do you have any final thoughts for us, Amelia?
No, just that I agree. I hope they catch this person.
I hope this person just heard this announcement because by the time like you guys hear this, this will be like old news, right? We just heard about this a couple days ago. It has already taken on a little bit of a life of its own. Like NBC has reported it. I've seen it reported all over the news because this is big. This is a major case. This is a popular story. One of the things that I am most interested to see is whether or not the DNA is going to be linked to someone that we've heard of in connection with this case before. Now, listen, before we started recording this podcast, I had planned for one of our 3 premiere episodes to be about Faith Hedgepeth. And then before I could write anything, somebody was arrested for her murder and it was no longer an unsolved crime. And so we didn't report it. I think what stunned the world, not just me, was that it was a completely new name to everyone. Like anyone who's familiar with that case and watched the various documentaries about her, this was not a name any of us had heard of before. It was not one of the people anyone had suspected. So I'm really curious to see if, I'm on eggshells waiting to see what's going to come of this. So I set my Google alert. Everybody set your Google alerts for Brianna Maitland. I think one of the problems in this case from kind of the public perspectives that maybe there was a little bit of judgment on Brianna, you know what I mean? Like the way that she was considered a runaway immediately, even though she really wasn't a runaway. A lot of people feel like they lost some valuable time there because they didn't take it seriously when they found the car, or even when her mom initially reported it, it still took a while for them to even connect the car. The way that people just kind of pushed the drug angle, which, is possible, but like doesn't mean that they overlooked other possibilities for what happened to her because they were so convinced that maybe she had something to do with drugs. Another question I have is, do her parents really know her as well as they think they do? I mean, it's been 18 years, right? So if she had a secret life that none of her family or friends knew about, don't you think someone somewhere would have, uncovered it by now? But also sounds like her mom wanted to see the best in her and maybe things were a little tougher on her than she thought that she wanted to acknowledge. Okay, so we have a call to action for you tonight. We actually have two calls to action for you tonight. Visit DNAsolves.com and contribute to funding any of their open cases, either financially or through submitting your DNA. You can even join the DNA Solves Advocates Facebook community, like Amelia and I have, or their mailing list to stay up to date on their latest investigations. They're not a sponsor. They're not affiliated with us anyway. We're just super fans, and they do great, important work, and we want to send you their way. Amelia, will you tell us about the final call to action about Brianna?
Brianna Maitland was last seen March 19th, 2004 at the Black Lantern Tavern and Inn in Montgomery, Vermont. Her pale green four-door 1985 Oldsmobile sedan was located on March 20th, 2004 off East Berkshire Road and Route 118 across Dutchburn Farm Road, about a mile outside of Montgomery. At the time of her disappearance, Brianna was described as a Caucasian female with brown hair and hazel eyes, 5'3" to 5'5", 105 to 118 pounds. Brianna has a faint scar extending from her left eyebrow to her forehead. Her left nostril is pierced. She wore a small ring or stud in at the time of her disappearance. She wears contact lenses and takes prescription medication for migraines, but all were left behind when she vanished. Brianna's nicknames are Bree and B. She was 17 at the time of her disappearance. She's turning 36 years old this year. If you have any information about the disappearance of Brianna Maitland, please call Vermont State Police at 802-524-5993.
That's all we have for you tonight, but we will be back next week with another unsolved case. You can find shareable content on our social media at Lost Souls of America and our website, lostsoulsofamerica.com. Please share often and help spread awareness for their cases. These are the stories of the voiceless. These are the lost souls of America.